Hi, welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Today on the show, big news coming not only out of Idaho, but South Dakota as well. We're going to sit down and talk with Fred Deutsch in just a minute. Fred is part of the Republican Party, and he has some big news coming out of the states that, well, he was a big hand in making happen, and something that I think anyone who's against the trans movement understands why this needs to happen. Now, with us today, John Euler is here. John, great to have you on the program. Our special guest, Fred Deutsch, is an American politician and Republican member of the South Dakota House of Representatives. He's representing District 4. He lives in the northeast portion of South Dakota, so a beautiful part. He's previously served 9 years with the Watertown Board of Education, was first elected as the State House back in 2014. He was re-elected in 2018, coming in first in a five-way race, so it was a tight one there, but he also first attempted to run for the District 4 seat back in 2012. In February 2016, Deutsch drew national attention for introducing one of the earliest bathroom bills, which aimed really to make it illegal for public school students to use bathroom, shower room, or even locker room for sex, or for a sex other than their sex at birth. The bill was vetoed by Republican Governor Dennis Daugaard back then, but in 2020, Deutsch introduced another bill that would make it a felony for pediatricians to provide sex change operations or opposite sex hormones to youth ages 15 and under, punishing doctors with up to 10 years in prison. Fred, great to have you here. It's a pleasure. It's a real shock over the last couple of days that this has come down in Idaho, and South Dakota is where this kind of all started, and it's just great to have you on the show. John, again, you've got quite the guest today, and I know there's a lot to get to, so I'll let you start it off, John.
Well, it's my distinct privilege to introduce to the audience Dr. Fred Deutsch and Representative Deutsch, all in the same. And I really want people to understand that this is the man who, if ever in my estimation there's a hero, and true heroes don't feel they are heroes, but Fred is.
They don't all wear capes, right?
Right. And the recent Supreme Court decision to uphold the legislation that was passed and signed in Idaho was modeled after Fred's original piece of legislation back in 2018. I was privileged he reached out to a number of very distinguished individuals, a number of whom we've had on our program. And so this behind the scenes group and when I say behind the scenes, that's how it's done. You have what amounts to a brain trust, people that have subject matter knowledge or expertise getting together, trying to figure out how to craft and help with the best piece of legislation. Fred spearheaded that. Fred is the one that introduced that, and it is going to be, in my estimation, it's going to go down in history as the model bill, which has already been the model for states that have passed, trying to rein in the medicalization, the sterilization, and the mutilation of this most vulnerable of all populations, very gender confused kids. Fred, thank you for your efforts, your work, and the Supreme Court just recently upheld the Idaho bill, and so we at least have been given a time to catch our breath and begin to really double down on efforts to protect kids. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me. It's my honor to be here and to share with you some of the background of our efforts. And hopefully we can continue to go forward and protect vulnerable kids.
There we go. Well, for those that may not have heard, because it's been strangely silent, you would think this would have been all over the news in more dramatic fashion. So I thought I would play a recent clip from the main network news. Let me bring that up here, just so people understand how significant this is, because I almost never thought I would see the day. And so here we go, behind the scenes. Let me bring this up. And for the audience, we will show you what just happened. And this is ultimately can be traced back to the hard work of Dr. Deutsch. If we can hear it, wait, my opponent.
Gender affirming care for transgender kids, a law that could potentially put.
Sorry, technical difficulties. Let's start it again.
We're learning the Supreme Court is letting Idaho enforce its ban on gender affirming care for transgender kids, a law that could potentially put doctors behind bars if they give a child under the age of 18 hormones or puberty blockers or any other gender affirming care. Lawrence Hurley is joining us now. Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, so basically the Supreme Court divided, with the 3 liberal justices dissenting, has allowed this law to go into effect almost fully. What they're saying is that the 2 transgender teens who challenged the law, they can still pursue their claim, and it's not going to be enforced against them. But a district court went too far in saying that the entire law had to be blocked. And so that means that it can still be enforced against other people. And one key provision, which is one concerning a ban on surgery, which will remain blocked too. And the court says, among other things, that the 2 teens in this case had not said that they were requiring surgery anyway, which is one of the reasons why the law shouldn't be blocked as a whole. Those 2 teens were getting puberty blockers and estrogen, and they will still be able to get the care that they need. But anyone else in the state who maybe needs that care or would like surgery, who's in that same position, would not be able to get it for now.
There's nothing better than...
Okay, well, you know, for the main network news, that's the worst they could do. So that's stellar. Of course, you know, these poor kids won't be able to get the care that they need. No, these poor kids have been manipulated. So, Fred, again, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Your bill has become the template around the country. And so what an amazing thing. I have the bill. We'll bring that up in a moment. Let's first talk about any impression from that news article, and then let's give some history. Give some history of how you decided, what prompted you to step up and do this.
Sure. Well, what impresses me about that news clip is the reference to the term gender affirming care. And, you know, the reality is what the industry wants to do is to affirm mental illness, to affirm non-reality, unreality, if you will, that a boy can become a girl or a girl can become a boy. And that's just not reality. And so what we've attempted to do, you know, in our legislation in South Dakota and elsewhere through the country, is to provide compassionate standards, compassionate oversight, to provide these children that have confusion about whether they're a boy or a girl, to provide them some, hopefully, you know, real relief through counseling and mental health sessions, to provide them direction and understanding of who they really are, and not to manipulate their bodies in a way that sterilizes them or mutilates them. These are children that are searching, that are trying to understand who they are. And for doctors to offer these children cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers and surgeries that their body doesn't need, that is terrible for them. That's just, these doctors, in my opinion, are criminals. And that's the purpose of the bill, is to say, whoa, this is not the practice of medicine. Just like these lobotomies from history is not the practice of psychiatry. It's a very dark chapter in the history of medicine. I think 20 or 30 years from now, we're going to look back at this chapter on how physicians maltreated, mistreated these vulnerable children, and we're going to shake our heads much as we do now. looking back on evil practices of medicine from the past.
I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, let me to provide proof of what you're saying. Let's look at the bill briefly. You know, the news clip that we saw, they did their best to try to reframe it. Gender affirming care. You know, these poor kids, you know, they're still going to be able to receive the care that they need. So let's look at the legislation in Idaho that the Supreme Court upheld. And again, it's modeled after your original bill. I want people to see that it is House Bill 71 that became law in Idaho. I'm going to switch tab. Brad, did that switch on your end? Everybody see that? Okay. Let's go down to, you can see this is how a bill is done, right? So you've got the back and forth. Let's go to section 2, because this is really what we're talking about. Okay, except as provided in subsection 4 of this section, any medical practitioner who knowingly engages in any of the following practices upon a child for the purpose of attempting to alter the appearance, it's cosmetic surgery, quite frankly, right?
That's right.
Or affirm the child's perception of the child's sex, if that perception is inconsistent with the child's biological sex, shall be guilty of a felony. So here's what the other side still wants to allow kids to be manipulated into undergoing. Here we go. Performing surgeries that sterilize or mutilate. Okay, so this is what we're protecting kids against, as we should. Or artificially construct tissue with the appearance of genitalia that differs from the child's biological sex, including castration, vasectomy, hysterectomy, oophorectomy, some of the right, plasty, orchiectomy. I mean, these are false penises, false vaginas that you drill into boys, penile-ectomy, phalloplasty. You can see how many of these, right? So, look, some of these, right? Gosh, scrotioplasty. So I need to get up on my terminology. I thought I was up on some of the medical terminology. So we can ask, and there's puberty blocking medication or delay of normal puberty as you go on. So we could simply ask anyone, does anybody feel it is ever appropriate to perform surgeries that sterilize or mutilate a child? That's what, Fred, that's what you introduced. That's what's been modeled around the country. So aside from this false narrative, we're simply protecting kids. You have protected kids from being mutilated and sterilized.
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's the whole effort of the bill, the whole effort of the movement. It's what state legislators are supposed to do. We are charged with protecting the vulnerable, protecting the weak, protecting those that can't protect themselves. And it was my honor to bring the bill forward. I mean, obviously, it was a big fight, and it caught fire. And you know, the bill didn't pass the first time in South Dakota, but the second time it did. And now it's moving across the country, and I hope it continues to move across the country.
Fred, at one point you had 44 other lawmakers proposing this with you. Do you still have 44 others with you?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah. The number is strong, and that was part of the initial strategy on my part, is to reach out to my colleagues and say, look, here's the bill. Will you sign on, support what we're trying to do? And
as a matter of fact, the calls that came in, Fred, I was going back and reading, it was 2-1 or so. The meaning good people were stepping up, parents were concerned, and everybody was in support of this. You became a lightning rod for those that were pushing for the medicalization and sterilization and mutilation of these kids. But it was heartening to read how in the local paper it was saying that the calls came in from people that get it. Once you explain this to parents and all good citizens, they realize that the talking points on those that are seeking to exploit kids. This is exploiting vulnerable kids, for, as I say, for profit and for prey, P-R-E-Y, because sexual predators love this movement because it dumbs down a young person's ability to intuitively have a sense of their own boundaries. And so it sets them up for a life of being exploited and preyed upon.
Yeah. John, I don't know any legislator that runs for election to do this kind of work, frankly. I mean, I had no idea this was in my future when I first ran. My intention in running was just to uphold, Republican values, small government, low taxes, provide local control to schools and so on. But when this issue came forward and I saw how many children were being hurt, and frankly was appalled at the physicians that would do this, learned individuals, people that go to school, people that we look up to in society would do this to our children. I couldn't sit down.
For them to just jump on board and manipulate the children in this way has been overwhelming to not only the kids, but us parents as well. I'm up here in Canada, so for us, I'm not allowed to talk about any of this, but of course I'll never stop because there's fighters out there. Pierre Barnes, I don't know if you're aware of him, but he's a big force here in Canada against all of this. We keep fighting every single day and every single week and every month and every year now for the last 4 because of this situation. Now, here in Canada, we need to do the exact same thing. We need to get our lawmakers and our politicians involved. We need to get them to understand what's being said in the bill that's coming out of Idaho, which originated in South Dakota. Is this going to pass in South Dakota soon?
Well, it did pass. It did pass last year. Representative Bethany Soy followed in my footsteps and brought House Bill 1080, which was nearly identical to the bill that I introduced, and it passed. It was signed into law by Governor Kristi Noem.
Fantastic.
So we are protecting our children, absolutely.
That's fantastic. So up here in Canada, we need to get that involved here somehow, some way. I mean, we're still being blocked every which way from Sunday. We're not allowed to talk about it. We've got, more than enough political, governmental kind of strategy to silence us all. But, through the likes of John Euler, we've been able to keep our momentum going here strong in Canada and keep people educated and get them on the path of understanding what's really going on, because nobody's talking about it up here at all except there's small little factions here and there that are trying to step up and make their case. But nobody makes it as good as what you've done here in this bill.
Pray for Canada, PRAY.
Yeah.
Lots of ways.
As a matter of fact, Fred, this is a perfect opportunity then. Would you speak to those local and provincial lawmakers and policymakers, but speak to your counterparts north of the border? Help them understand what went into as far as the everything from the wording. I mean, they can get a hold of the bill, but speak to your counterparts in Canada to encourage them and, to really help light a fire.
Give them some guidance.
This is possible.
Give them some guidance. That's what they need right now, is some definite guidance, because the wording that we're using isn't the wording that's being there's always a challenge. They've manipulated the words. They've manipulated the definitions of words. So the words that we try to put together are not what you're saying within your bill and what you've written, Fred. So that's where your work has become so valuable at this moment in time. You've created the right wording to make people go, wow.
Yeah. Well, so a lot of people provided input into the wording. But I think it starts just with a very basic understanding that men and women are different. We have different chromosomes. Every cell in our body is either male or female, right? I mean, we're men, we're women. You can't cross over. And what this movement, this transgender movement, wants people to believe is that you can, and it's just not reality. So once you have that understanding that we are different, and that's a good thing that we're different. That's just how we were created, and that creation comes at the moment of conception. I mean, that's when we are made. I mean, that's not theology, that's biology, and it doesn't it doesn't have to be rocket science. It's basic biology. Once you understand that, moving forward with legislation based on science should not be hard. And those doctors that don't recognize it should have their license taken away. They shouldn't be doctors. I mean, it's very basic. They get it in their first year of medical school.
Or they get it in elementary school, right? The difference between male and female.
Well, that's right. That's right. And those doctors that commit harms to children, that do these surgeries that remove penises from little boys and breasts from teenage girls, those doctors should be behind bars. They should not be allowed in society. They have committed crimes against humanity, in my humble opinion.
So will there be accountability there?
Well, in the states where these bills are passed, there is accountability.
So lawsuits are starting to happen now. We're starting to see parents stepping up and going, that's enough of this. My child is detransitioning now, and they want accountability. So is that we're going to see a lot more of that happening? Is that fair to say?
Well, we should. Right. Absolutely. I mean, that's what these bills do. They set standards that doctors, I mean, the penalty against the doctors vary from state to state. It depends what the lawmakers have put in place. In some states, they can't practice anymore. Their license is removed. In other states, there's a penalty for going to jail. And it depends what's been brought into law by the lawmakers.
Fred, as you're talking, I'm just going to give visual effect. This comes from a interview I did with Alex Aron on the dangers of transgender medicine. So keep going, but I figure, you know what, we might as well help people see.
Yeah.
They call this top surgery.
You're taking terrible.
A woman, a young female who's confused, and look at the profit these doctors are making. And as you said, here's what they do to the boys.
That's just so disgusting.
Right, but people need to see it. This is exactly what you have. Right, they're calling this care. Fred, we don't call this care. This is what the Nazis used to do.
This is mutilation.
And this is what you have stopped.
Yeah. I can't watch it, John. I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, but right. So if people want to call you anything other than a hero, they need to see that that's what these frauds have been pushing on kids.
Guys, what's a class 4 felony? What does that come with in terms of, accountability there?
Well, in South Dakota, it's 20 years or 10 years and I think $10,000
per case.
Yes, if you're
30, they did 30 surgeries on 30 kids, they're going to get sued 30 times, and they would lose all 30 times, so they could end up with 30 times 10, right?
Well, that's correct. Now,
wow.
I should clarify, Brad. The bill that was eventually passed in South Dakota does not have that penalty. The bill that was eventually passed here is a loss of licensure.
Okay. So in Idaho now, they went with the class 4?
Oh, you know what? I don't know. The classes can vary from state, the definition. So a class 4 in Idaho can be different than a class 4 in South Dakota.
Okay.
So I'm not sure, Brad.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we're still good with loss of licensure. It still stops them.
That's right. And we're wanting to protect children. That's really the bottom line. That's right. You know, those procedures that you showed are they want to make me vomit. And you know, anytime a legislator steps up to the plate to bring a bill like this, absolutely, you take arrows. I've taken umpteen arrows, lots of arrows,
Including death threats. I mean, let's put that out
yes,
there.
yeah, death threats.
Threatened so many times, but
Yeah, I mean, that just goes with the territory. Unfortunately, you know, and our world has just gotten so insane and so crazy when somebody like myself that wants to protect children steps up to the plate and brings legislation and is eventually successful in helping to protect children, for the opposition to threaten you with "I'm going to kill you." I mean, that's beyond bizarre.
it shows you how committed these, I'm calling them perpetrators. Anybody that's going to do that to a vulnerable person where you exploit them. Many of these young people have been sexually abused. And so because of sexual trauma, they're either in a dissociative state, parts of them come out, they don't identify with the same sex. And so you're taking a child, a young person, a troubled teen that has serious comorbidities as far as multiple mental health diagnoses, and you are then exploiting them because they cannot give meaningful consent, informed consent. And so this is an exploitation from beginning to end on these kids. And Dr. Fred Deutsch, you have stepped up. You did that in 2018. You assembled a great group of people, and I was privileged to be one of those voices in the background giving suggestions, but you took the arrows, you stood up, and you crafted a piece of legislation that has become the model across the state. If anybody wants to contact you to confer, may they do that? Can they reach out to you?
Sure, absolutely. They can email me. My legislative email is public, fred.deutsch@sdlegislature.gov. Happy to visit with anybody, other legislators or other folks watching this that would like to see if they can move this effort forward in their state. I'd be happy to help.
Fred, your time is valuable. I reached out as soon as I heard about this story. As we begin to wrap things up, what message would you like to share both with parents and other lawmakers?
Well, if you're a parent, I would just say, hang in there. There are professionals like John that can help you, and just reach out. Know that people love you and support you and care about your children and want what's best for them. For lawmakers, I would say, have heart, be courageous. These bills have passed maybe in half of the states, and we're hoping we'll see more of them pass as time goes on, because our job as legislators is to protect our people. And when there are children that don't know if they're a boy or a girl, and they're being confused by all of the voices that come at them, our jobs are to protect them.
Dr. Deutsch, you were good enough to carve out time this morning, and we want to honor that. Thank you so much, first of all, for your leadership in stepping forward, and even with the bathroom bill way back when, to protect kids, because this is so far reaching. As a matter of fact, before we close, maybe I could ask you to speak to, there are so many facets of this, still so many tentacles of this squid or octopus or creature, the hydra. We have males that are still wanting to get into female sports. So this is an attack upon women's sports, girls' sports, as well as deviant men pushing their way, demanding access as far as male inmates. 100% of them represent a threat to the females, and there's a push, like in California, to put males in female prisons. Can you speak to either of those issues, and then any other legislation that you believe needs to be enacted to protect women and children?
Well, it's vital that we protect women. I mean, obviously, we should not ever have men in women's sports. That's just crazy. Having men in women's prison, crazy. In any way that women are hurt, when men become involved, I think those are prohibitions that we need to pass as legislators. South Dakota also passed legislation to keep men out of women's sports. I think every state needs to do that. That's just beyond the pale. In my community, 2 years ago, we had a school teacher that was fired because he wouldn't agree to use the preferred pronouns by some of the students. I think we need to pass protections in states that would prohibit teachers and other students from being penalized for not using pronouns that don't conform to the biologic sex. So I think those are things that will be coming.
Maybe the pornography that is in drawing form, right, that is being put in front of the kids from SOGI, sex ed, sexual orientation, gender identity. If those drawings were actual photographs, the adults would be arrested for dissemination of pornography. But they found a loophole because they are drawings. They get those in front of the kids. So
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's just so much more that need to be done to protect women and children from the craziness that seems to be escalating every day.
Well, that's exactly where we have to wrap this up today, is because there's still a long way to go. We've got a good win here. We've got some great information to take away from the day. And it's because of you, Fred. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for being the guy that you are and stepping up the way that you have. John and I continue to fight. We're on your side, and we're right there with you. We don't have to be in the same room at the same time, but you know that together we're still trying to get the job done, and we'll keep fighting until, well, this stops permanently and we start to get the definition of right and wrong back on track. John, any last words today?
Just again, extending our appreciation on behalf of, I think, all good people in the U.S. and hopefully Canada as well. Fred, thank you for your leadership, and how heartened we are that the Supreme Court, at least a number of the justices, saw fit to uphold reason and sanity and the protection of vulnerable youth.
Yeah. Amen. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
You're very welcome. We'll see you again as we get more great news as other states start to sign on. We look forward to having you back on the program and getting more good wins out of this. And as we move forward, is try to change the political landscape here in November. I hope that we get that red wave that we're all searching for. Thanks again for being here, Fred.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you, John. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for paying attention and watching. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. I'm Brad Wilder. On behalf of John Euler and Fred Deutsch, we'll see you next time.